Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special Festivus edition of Liberty Blue Podcast. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone that is checking in on the show the second time this week. Liberty Blue is powered by the Believe Network. So, if you are unfamiliar with Festivus, there are a number of activities that come along with this holiday that's 2 days before Christmas. Festivus, of course, comes from the Seinfeld universe, one of the producers of Seinfeld. His father actually came up with the idea of Festivus, and there are some differences in that person's personal experiences versus what you saw Jerry Stiller do on the show. But one of the core tenets of Festivus is spending time with your family and your friends. And one of the components of Festivus is called the airing of grievances, where you tell people all of the ways they have disappointed you and let you down over the course of the last year. And this is meant to clear the air. And ultimately, you end up having the host of Festivus picking somebody who is at Festivus dinner to a physical confrontation called the Feats of Strength. And the holiday does not end until the host is pinned by the chosen. But on today's show, we're airing grievances because Andrew and I have beaten around the bush a little bit the last few weeks. And I don't really think you want to listen to two people go back and forth for an hour complaining about all of the reasons they're frustrated with the Rangers. But me by myself, I had a little bit of extra juice today. A variety of reasons, some hockey, some not. And just at a certain point, we need to be realistic. And to start this conversation, I think it's important that I lay out the argument I'm going to make. So we're going to start out with the concept, the foundation. What is wrong with the Rangers? Why they don't work? So the foundation is where we're going to start. Just how the roster is built and what the philosophy of the roster is. That's where we're going to start. Number two, we will talk about the types of players that fall into that mindset that the organization so highly covets. Number three, we will talk about the mindset of implementing such an approach in 2025. And then to tie a bow on it, we're going to talk about why it isn't exactly obvious how this situation gets better. So to start out, the New York Rangers have undergone several different iterations in my lifetime of a conscious memory. The earliest Ranger teams I recall are the Yager post-lockout teams, which were one-line teams and young Henrik Lundqvist going crazy. Then you fired Tom Rennie, you brought in John Tortorella. You brought up a bunch of young guys over a short period of time. Callahan, Girardi, Stahl, Dubinsky, Anisimov. I could go on and on, a litany of young guys, Stepan, Carl Hagelin, pieces who over time became recognizable and identifiable components of a solid core. And the key to becoming a long-term, sustained contender is both identifying when it's time to move on from players. Even if they still have good hockey left, sometimes it's better off to move on than it is to give them a multi-year extension based on that. So that's the first real iteration of the team. You hit that delineation point in 2015 where the cap crunch is real. You have to move Hagelin, you have to move Cam Talbot, and then year after that, you end up having to make a decision. We're going to move Derek Stepan. We're going to get younger. We're going to get cheaper. And that sliding doors moment of trading Derek Stepan before his no-trade protection kicks in, getting Tony DeAngelo in a first-round pick from Arizona. Of course, if you want to believe the conjecture, you want to believe the speculation, that was in part so the Rangers were trying to go up and get Clayton Keller in that draft, if I remember correctly. Ultimately, they couldn't convince Arizona to part with that pick. But nevertheless, from 2017 through 2021, the Rangers are actively bad, and they sell off pretty much all of the quality recognizable faces. Zibanejad and Kreider stay. Beyond that, they trade away pretty much everything that's not nailed down. They pick in the first round, I think it's 9 times in a 5-year window. They draft over 30 players in a 4-year window. And to show for that, they came away with a first overall pick, a second overall pick, a 7th, a 9th, I think a 17th, a 27th, a 19th. They picked in the top 32 picks of the draft a number of times. And the whole point of that prolonged, extended rebuilding period, remember, 2017, 2018, they went into that season expecting to make the playoffs. They pulled the ejection cord halfway through the year. Okay, rebuild. 2018-19, first year of David Quinn, they're miserable. They are as bad a hockey team as possibly assembled. They trade Zuccarello and Kevin Hayes during the course of that season as well, making the roster even uglier. 2019-2020, they trade for Adam Fox. They trade for Jacob Trouba. They sign Artemi Panarin. Okay, you get to the spring of that year. Shesterkin comes over, plays the first half of the year in the AHL. He gets promoted second half of the year. Everybody gets a little big for their britches. They go to the bubble playoffs. Well, we beat Carolina every time we play them in the regular season. Carolina smokes them, beats them 2 out of 3. They don't even get to that third game. And then the rough part of it, they beat them in 3. They don't get to a fourth game out of 5. The rough part here is after that season, the Rangers stubbornly started to think they were closer than they were because they had Panarin, because Fox was becoming something, because they saw what Shesterkin could be. And 2021 comes along, and they underperform. Now, you'll recall, Panarin leaves for a few weeks in the middle of the season, family leave of absence, the stuff that was going on over in Russia with his family. You'll recall a litany of injuries down the backstretch of the regular season, Kreider, Trouba, etc., culminates in the Tom Wilson situation. The Tom Wilson situation gets everybody fired because James Dolan doesn't like that John Davidson and Jeff Gorton are looking out for their own selves as opposed to the team. Panarin's the 4th or 5th highest paid player in the league. James Dolan wants some blood on the garden floor, and he doesn't get any. And the NHL effectively makes fun of the Rangers to their faces, and James Dolan says, that's not going to fly. I don't like this. And they fire everybody. And that enters Chris Drury, and that's where our story of today's show begins. Now, that was a nice 5-minute preamble, but the historical context matters because from 2010 to 2015, you had 5 real chances. You had 5 chances to really win. In those 5 chances, you got to the Cup final once. You got to a conference final at least 3 times. Okay, 3 out of 5, not terrible. The reason I'm talking about it in terms of years and windows is because there needs to be a trade-off. There needs to be an understanding that for X numbers of bad, we're going to give you X numbers of good in trade-off. And the Rangers are asking you right now as you sit here to be okay with having had traded 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, 20, 21, for 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24. That is what the Rangers are asking you to do right now. And the reason I frame it that way, when you look at the team that the Rangers have assembled, they are not expecting to win. Anybody who is telling you this Rangers team is capable of winning a Stanley Cup is lying to you. They do not have your best interest at heart. They do not actually care whether or not the Rangers win. Now, there are a lot of people who are arguing in the baddest of faith that because the East is so bad, all it takes is a little bit of luck, and you might be able to make a conference final by accident. And if you get there, if you're in the final 4 teams, anything can happen once you get there. But the counterpoint, and something I think is worth pointing out, the Rangers, as we sit here right now, are 18, 16, and 4. They have 40 points through 38 games. They are on pace to record 86.2 standings points. They have a 526 points percentage. That would be the lowest point total on record to ever qualify for the Stanley Cup playoffs in this format. We've had a couple teams in the low 90s. I think the low in this format is 91 standings points. I believe it was the Minnesota Wild in like 2016 or 17, somewhere in there. But this Rangers team has been assembled in the lowest risk, highest floor possible way because the general manager realized it was getting around to save my own ass time. And it is important that you understand, as much as somebody like Chris Drury might want to win a Stanley Cup, he wants his job more. It is so unbelievably important for you to understand that decision makers in sports are not always rational actors. And that's one of the baseline understandings of sports you need to have as we get further and further into such a hyper-commercialized space where we are just numbers on a spreadsheet. The Rangers do not care what 17,000 and change people show up when they play their 41 home games. If the tickets are sold, they don't care to who. They would let anybody sit anywhere if your credit card payment would clear. It is that simple. And the more you allow the Rangers to play upon your emotions, to play upon your loyalties, the worse off you are. Because the Rangers know they have you by the balls. This is a hockey team that presently has its most expensive player on pace for 80 points. That would be the lowest he has had in a full season as a Ranger. And this is someone who, again, which nobody wants to talk about, was credibly accused of sexual misconduct. Both Panarin and the Rangers paid the accuser off, and that was it. The Rangers said, it's over, it's done with. Panarin pretended he had no idea what anyone was talking about at the end of last year. This is a player on an expiring contract. This is a player who reportedly will not take less money if the Rangers ask him to. This is not somebody who fits the Chris Drury way. All Chris Drury wants to talk about is we play hockey the right way. We play hockey like Americans. We play like JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck. We are a no BS hockey team, except when it's convenient. And that is the God's honest truth when it comes to these types of people and the decisions they make. If you are worth more than the headache you cause, teams will overlook it. The Rangers, knowing that Panarin is their best player, even still, at 35, Panarin is easily their best forward, and they cannot be competitive without him. They are barely competitive with him in this state. And you are now at a point where the Rangers have assembled as uninteresting and as boring of a team as possible because this is how the GM thinks he can save his job. And that's all this is. As much as as much as the owner likes the GM, as much as the owner has insulated the GM and the GM has insulated himself, I do think that's an important point to make here. You read about the Rangers, it's just Chris Drury making these decisions. He doesn't have a robust department of advisors. He doesn't have an army of consultants or scouts. He's got a handful of former players. He's got a few math guys, and that's it. And he is the president, so he gets to make the business decisions, and he's the general manager, so he gets to make the roster decisions. Those are two separate jobs with two different sets of interests. It is extremely important that you get it through your head that the general manager and president have different functions. A president of a hockey team's responsibilities are to fill that building. The general manager's job is to win hockey games. And the way the Rangers are assembled right now is the most fugazi, we're not that bad, imaginable. The Rangers are not a serious hockey team. They're not. And the way you know this is the way they have done the 1 foot in, 1 foot out for each of the last year and a half. Last year, in the doldrums of that run, where I think they went, 5-16, 5-15 from the middle of November through the new year, and they really didn't get settled to being a 500 hockey team again until post JT Miller trade at the end of January. That's the kind of dire straits that enables you to reset. If the general manager was not so self-interested about needing to save his job because he was coming up to the last year of his contract, he wouldn't have traded for JT Miller last year. And look, I will be fair. Giving up Hedl, who may never return to the NHL, Mancini, who I am extremely skeptical of as a top forward defenseman, and a first-round pick, fine. Miller was good for them last year. He has been bad for them this year. He is somehow going to get a job. He's going to get to be on the Olympic team, but that's something I'll complain about on another episode. For right now, they have assembled the most run-of-the-mill Frankenstein monster of crap imaginable. And the reason I made that point earlier, the minute ago, about they have a bunch of guys who are holdovers from that last window. You still got Zibanejad, you still got Trocheck, you still got Panarin, you still got Lafreniere. You add JT Miller, you add Taylor Radish, Gavrikov. You could have taken last year on the chin and said, okay, it's over for those guys. But because they gave Shesterkin the big goalie extension, which, look, he's worth it. He's the best goalie in the NHL. I have no qualms about that. But you don't get to back out now, and that's, the murder-suicide pact that Chris Drury's made. In tethering himself to Zibanejad, to Adam Fox, to JT Miller, he has bought himself some internal capital. Because as long as he's got those guys, the Rangers will never be Blackhawks bad. They won't be Sharks of the last couple of years bad. They'll just be mediocre. And the mediocre teams occasionally get lucky. Every now and then, you make the playoffs as the 8th best team in the East. And that's good enough some years. And I am at a point where I am so unbelievably frustrated that I traded 5 years, like I said before, to get 3 kicks at the can, and they were never better than Tampa. They were never better than Florida. They were never going to be Tampa or Florida with the collection of guys they had. But the general manager has always been determined to prove he is right about hockey and everyone else is wrong. He is the one guy who wants to play low-event hockey and thinks he can win like this. You can tell me all you want. Well, this is how Florida plays. Florida has the talent to play this way and still score. The Rangers right now, if I remember correctly, I'm going to pull it up because I didn't write it down and it may have changed because there were hockey games since yesterday when we recorded. The Rangers have scored 95 goals this year. The league average is 108. They are averaging 2.5 goals per game this year. And if you want to go on a league-wide basis, they are 28th in goals for, and they are 31st in goals for per game. This is a team that is paying top of the market for Panarin, that gave Zibanejad an 8-year deal 3 years ago now. They gave Trocheck a 7-year deal 4 years ago now. You have such an old roster. When you are old and expensive, you're supposed to win. That's how the life cycle of teams go. The Oilers were the oldest team in the NHL last year, and they knew. They looked around at their situation and said, if we're going to keep competing, we need to try and get younger. And the Oilers haven't worked out the kinks of Matthew Savoy and Ike Howard and their litany of young pieces over the course of just the 40 games or so they've played this year. But they've understood that they have an opportunity around the guys they do. The Rangers are looking at this situation and saying, if we just grind every game into a pulp, we might be able to win. And this is the inherent problem with the USA hockey mentality. Mike Sullivan is doing about as good a job as he could with what he has access to. Mike Sullivan's teams in Pittsburgh the last couple of years were decent underlying numbers-wise. They had a lot of the puck. They created a lot of dangerous offense. They just have the guys to go and convert those. So when we talk about an airing of grievances, the entire premise of this team is wrong. This general manager assembled this team under the premise that they could still be competitive. And he has had the last season and a third, almost half now, we're almost at the 41 game mark. He's had almost a season and a half to figure out this team is not good enough. They're not. They are not good enough. And instead of trying to unwind his position and trying to figure out what the next group looks like, he is going to stubbornly continue to insist we just need to give these guys the right support. And whether that comes in the form of a misbegotten Alex Tuck trade or a trade that's not even on my radar, how dumb it is, this is a very poorly constructed team. I don't want to hear a word about the defense. I do not care. I don't care about Will Borgen. I don't care about Carson Soucy. I almost don't even get to care about Gavrikov. That's how depressing this team is. And it's a shame because Gavrikov is a pretty good hockey player. Gavrikov is the type of guy that at some point in the last 3 or 4 years would have really been helpful. Gavrikov on the team 2 years ago against Florida instead of Lindgren or Trouba might have made a difference. Ditto 2023, ditto 2022. But as always with Chris Drury, it is a dollar short and a day late. He identified that Ryan Lindgren wasn't good enough, but we had to keep running him out there. He had to keep playing on the first pair. Ditto Jacob Trouba. And that's the beautiful irony of this situation to me. Chris Drury staked himself. He put his stamp on this roster by going out and making Jacob Trouba the captain, by trading for Ryan Reeves, by trading for Barclay Goodrow, by trading for Sammy Blais, for signing Patrick Nemeth. And one by one, he came to realize those guys all were bad hockey players. I am sorry. I don't want to hear it. The misbegotten defenses of Goodrow and Trouba are mind-numbingly bad. If the Rangers had better guys in those roles, they could have maybe beaten Florida or Tampa Bay. Jacob Trouba was as bad a hockey player as you could possibly have. And the general manager and coach of this team looked you in the face and said, that's our captain. That is how little respect they have for you and your intelligence. They watched an actively bad player throw his helmet, instigate fights by throwing dirty hits, and still had the balls to tell you he is good at his job. Trust us. We know what we're talking about. Do you? The same exact thing with Barclay Goodrow. The same exact thing with Matt Rempe. Well, the guys on the team love him for what he does. Get them a pet dog. If they need vibes in the locker room, get a golden retriever to run around with people in the locker room. Because if we need to employ guys just for the vibes, we are not a good hockey team. And I'm sorry. I am so unbelievably tired of hearing about the guys on the team value what he does. Well, maybe if somebody good could do what those guys did, it might make a difference. The misbegotten and the obsession with intangibles is entirely rooted in psychosomatic nonsense. You are obsessed with intangibles and grit and physicality because you know your guys aren't good enough, and your failure to address that is why you are stuck. I'm getting mad because this was predictable. In 2020 and 21, Mika Zibanejad was peaking as a hockey player at 26, 27 years old. Just physical. That is the peak of your career physically. That is the best you are going to be in terms of your physical ability. At 27 is when you start to reach that plateau and then the eventual decline. It was very obvious that Mika Zibanejad was not going to become a 50-goal scorer the way he paced out as one in 2019, 2020. He had one of the most remarkable months as any Rangers ever had in March of 2020 before the world shut down. He was never going to be the first-line center of a Stanley Cup caliber team. Everybody who told you that was lying to you or too numb to realize the difference. It's that straight up. There were people with a straight face telling you Zibanejad's better than Jack Eichel. Trust us. The same general manager who keeps telling you to trust him has made these boneheaded decisions. They've told you, Sammy Blais better than Pavel Buchnevich. He's better. Trust us. We know what we're talking about. Jack Eichel, Zibanejad's better than him. Trust us. And the problem is, and one of the real reasons I get frustrated to the point where we're 5 years down the road now and I'm still mad, because everyone lies to you. The general manager, whenever he goes on the record, talks through his teeth. He never gives you actionable information. He can't explain anything to save his life. And it's not to the benefit of the general manager to explain his thoughts or his moves, because that gives who he's in negotiations with an advantage. But he treats the public with such utter contempt and disrespect. at basically all times, it's hard for me to care what he thinks because he is so shamelessly self-interested. Case in point, I said before about the Olympics, Miller will end up there, Trocheck might too. JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck have been actively bad this year. JT Miller, of the 30-ish games he's played this year, he's been actively bad, I would say, in about 2/3 of them. He's got a couple overtime goals. He's the captain. That's great. For the first month of the season, he was atrocious. He couldn't move. But he's going to get to be on the team because Chris Drury is the assistant GM, and he's friends with the GM, Bill Guerin, who they all went to BU together, and they all played for Jack Parker, and they're all BU alumni, and everyone's buddy, and Mike Sullivan went, and David Quinn went, and John Hines went, and really quickly, you start to piece together why the Rangers have the problems they do. Everything is tied to that. I did it this way has to be right because I did it this way. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's friends with everybody. There's no accountability. The general manager doesn't get held accountable. The team missed the playoffs last year, and he got a multi-year extension and got to trade K'Andre Miller. He got to extend pieces. He got to pick and choose. He still hasn't turned a draft pick into a player. Noah Laba might be something, but I'm not particularly impressed by a third-line center. He's big and he's fast. Those are useful traits, but can you turn him into a functional play-driving guy, or is he just going to be your novelty? I mean, the amount of oxygen that gets wasted on average players like Braden Schneider and Will Borgen, it is just mind-boggling. And then getting back to the larger point, the idea that we're trying to have our cake and eat it too, and the general manager's always right. This is a team after last year that told you missing the playoffs is unacceptable, that we're going to bounce back and we're going to be competitive again. And this is a team that's been playing Connor Sheary in the top 6. And look, I think Mike Sullivan's a decent hockey coach. I don't put much of the blame for the way this season has gone at his feet. He is doing the most he can with what he's got. At the same time, I'm done with Connor Sheary. I don't care. I do not care. I don't want to hear any more anecdotal evidence. I don't want to hear what JT Miller thinks about him. I don't want to hear what Vincent Trocheck thinks about him. He is not a very good hockey player. You cannot be a serious hockey team employing guys like Connor Sheary in the top 6. Connor Sheary spent the entirety of last season in the AHL for a reason. You know who Tampa Bay did at the deadline last year? Tampa Bay was a team that went out and traded for both Oliver Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde because they needed him so badly. And you know what's funny? JT Miller said, I am playing some of the best hockey of my life with Connor Sheary. JT Miller has been outscored 7-4 in 218 minutes with Connor Sheary on his line. Absolute, utter nonsense. And that's what I mean when I say anecdotal evidence doesn't matter. The Rangers play better when Matt Rempe's in the lineup. Prove it. Can you prove it? Do they win more? Do they score more? Do they concede less? No, they don't, because it is anecdotal. It is jingling keys meant to distract you from the fact the team is old, expensive, and bad. I am so unbelievably tired and fed up with the way this team is spoken about. They lack finishing talent. They're bad. Those are not the same thing. You don't get to say a team is good if they lack finishing talent. They are bad. Those are not the same thing. Lacking finishing talent is what you say about the Hurricanes, who put together good metrics, win hockey games in the regular season, and then when push comes to shove against a better team, they lose. The Rangers are bad. There is a fundamental difference between being a team that can't score because you are bad and being a team that can't score because you're playing a team that's better than you. I am so unbelievably tired of the characterizations of the poor Rangers. How did it get to this point? They can't score. They're a poorly built team. The general manager refuses to call a spade a spade. He's looking out for his own self-interest. So we're going to add, we're going to sell, we're going to constantly keep the target moving. And watch, the Rangers are going to sell you a lemon and tell you we will be back next year. You saw them laying the groundwork for this in September when Vince and Peter at The Athletic wrote, Chris Drury has done a good job setting up the Rangers for next summer when players like Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel and Kirill Kaprizov will be unrestricted free agents, and woe and behold, none of them are going to be there because this is the NHL and good teams don't lose players. It's that simple. You have a problem, Chris Drury. This is a star-driven league. You have no star forwards. You have a star goalie. You have a star defenseman. You want to win a Stanley Cup, you need at least 3 or 4 of those guys, regardless of position. Unfortunately for the Rangers, because we are in an offense-first league now, having the world's best goalie and a top 5 defenseman is not nearly as valuable as it would be to have 2 top 5 offensive players. You look at the way Edmonton can afford to construct their roster because they have 2 of the 5 best forwards, 2 of the 3 best forwards in the world in McDavid and Draisaitl. You look at the way Colorado can assemble the rest of their roster because they have a top 10 forward, they have a top 2 forward and a top 2 defenseman. You look at the way Dallas can assemble their roster with 1 top 10 forward in Rantanen and 2 top 10 defensemen in Heiskanen and Harley, and then a top 10 goalie in Ottinger. And then you go down the depth, and the Rangers don't have shit. The Rangers do not have shit. Minnesota's got a top 10 forward and top 10 defenseman, top 2 defenseman now in Quinn Hughes. Minnesota understood the way you do this. And I don't want to hear a damn thing about, well, Chris Drury was trying to win. Why should he have been worried about the prospect pool? Well, because eventually you are going to need prospects if you would like to continue being a contender. And there is the Rangers' problem. The Rangers have not a single notable prospect who is ready to be an impact player at the NHL level. Gabriel Perreault, one day, might be a second liner on a good team. I'm not saying a first liner. I'm not even saying on a great team. One day, he might be able to be a 55-point guy on a good team. EJ Emery, I'm good on the defensive defenseman, man. Apparently they found one in Will Borgen, because that's all anyone seems to want to talk about is they can't believe they found Will Borgen. They can't believe they got him for so cheap. Will Borgen can't do a thing in the offensive zone. I don't care. This is an offense-driven league, and this general manager and coach are all in on trying to win every game 1-0. The most misbegotten, dare I say, just pure hubris to think this was going to work. And look, if you want to give the GM the benefit of the doubt and say, well, he didn't think they were going to be able to win, but he wanted to be competitive, then what's the point? Why are you watching the team? If the goal is to be competitive, they're there. There's nothing left to accomplish. We know they're not winning a lot. We know they're not a Stanley Cup team. Hell, we know they're probably not even a playoff team. And you have people, well, if they make the playoffs and they get maybe Carolina or New Jersey in the first round, it's a favorable match. Okay. Eventually, you're going to end up in the steel cage with Tkachuk and Barkov and Marchand and Forsling and Bobrovsky, and you have Connor Sheary. This is the Anthony Edwards. Yeah, they got KD. We got Jaden McDaniel. The Rangers suck. I am so tired of hearing defensives of this team. I am so tired of hearing about how good we had it. This is professional sports. The smartest minds in this space find ways to be competitive in spite of the limitations they have. I don't want to hear about no movement clauses. I don't want to hear about no trade clauses. The general manager gave them out or acquired them. I don't care that Carson Soucy has a no-trade clause. Why did you trade for him? Why does Will Borgen have a no-trade clause? Why does Vincent Trocheck have a no-trade clause? Why does Mika Zibanejad have an ironclad no-movement clause? All of these are bad decisions made by a bad general manager. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. The general manager can't be bothered to show his face in public other than to announce firing a coach or hiring a coach, or at the trade deadline when he underwhelms, as always, because he is constantly moving the goalpost for what the expectations are. He out of one corner of his mouth, he has at times said, well, we would trade Panarin if we could. We'd trade Zibanejad if we could. And then when he's had teams good enough to at least have a conversation about winning a championship with, he's reinforced them with luminaries such as Frank Vetrano and Andrew Kopp and Alex Wenberg and Jack Roslovic. He didn't go get JT Miller in 2021 when it made a difference because we have to protect Braden Schneider. He's going to be the new Trouba. Well, we can't trade Gabriel Perreault. We don't want Jake Gensel. We can't trade Perreault in the division. He might become something. Even Jake Gensel. Oh, well, they couldn't have extended Jake Gensel. Yes, they could have. They are the Rangers, through the people who cover the team, are constantly lying to you about what they could have afforded to do, when they could have afforded to do it, and we just eat it like piggies from the trough. All we do is eat up our slop and do what we're told. This team sucks. It is run abysmally. It would not have been that hard to sustain the team at a competitive level after flaming out against Florida 2 years ago. It would not have been that hard. The general manager lacked the conviction to make the move. And then he did the moves he was too scared to make after when it made a difference. Think about how much better the Rangers could have been in 2024 if they didn't have almost $12 million tied up in Barclay Goodrow and Jacob Trouba. Think about that for a minute. You know what $11.5 million buys you? Artemi Panarin. $11.5 million is one superstar, or it's two really good players. You could have had Jake Gensel. It's that simple. And that's why I'm tired of being lied to. Because if the Rangers really wanted Jake Gensel, they could have traded Gabriel Perreault and whatever picks it would have taken. And the fucking Penguins didn't even get a lot for him. They got Michael Bunting, of all crap, from the Hurricanes. It's mind-boggling to listen to people accept this. You could have gotten Jake Gensel on this team. And yeah, would it have been awkward to have to get rid of Trouba and Gaudreau in the summer? Yeah, you ended up having to do it anyway. That's why I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired of this. It did not need to be like this. But the general manager is smarter than everybody else. He won the Little League World Series 40 years ago. He went to BU. He played for Jack Parker. He won the Calder. He won the Stanley Cup with the Avalanche. He was the captain of the Sabres. He was captain of the Rangers. He was the director of Rangers player personnel. He was the assistant general manager. He was the general manager of the Hartford Wolfpack. The Wolfpack win anything? The Rangers turn out any good players while Drury was the director of player development? These are all questions I would love to ask, and nobody ever wants to talk about them. He entirely got this job because James Dolan likes him. I have told the story on the show more than one time. I was told by a journalism professor of mine. James Dolan hired Glenn Sather to be president of the team because when James Dolan was a kid, James Dolan had his father owned the Rangers. James was at practice one day. Glenn Sather gave him a puck. James Dolan remembered that all these years, and James Dolan, as we know, is, as the kids say, easy to schmooze. If you're nice to him, he'll be nice to you back. If you criticize him, he'll ban you from the arena and he'll use his illegal face biometric software to track you and make sure you can't come into his arena. So all of this is to say, I am beyond done with this hockey club. They are so uninteresting. They play such boring, uninspired hockey. I don't really care what happens most games anymore. I care about what happens to the team. The games themselves at this point, it doesn't really matter if they win or lose because we're not making progress. That's the real kick in the balls about this season. No matter what happens, it doesn't really matter. They're not getting closer to winning. They've still got another 5 years of JT Miller and Mika Zibanejad to get through. They're not winning anything with those guys. It's that simple. You look at the teams in this league who have won Stanley Cups in the last 10 years. And the makeup of those teams, the types of players, both skill set, size, style of play, pedigree, it's not a contest. It's not a conversation. Let's do this. Barkov is going to go to the Hall of Fame. Tkachuk, Matthew, if he keeps playing like this, will likely end up in the Hall of Fame. Sergei Bobrovsky, lock. Brad Marchand, probably going to get there. Reinhart, Bennett, none of those guys really scream Hall of Famer to me. Maybe Reinhart, if he keeps going crazy in his late 20s into his 30s, it's possible, I suppose. But at least 3 Hall of Famers, almost certainly 4. You go to before that, Vegas. Jack Eichel, decent case. He gets a gold medal at the Olympics, really bolster his case. Alex Pietrangelo, one of like the 3 guys ever to win 2 cups as captain on 2 different teams. Those 2 guys, pretty good. Now, only 2, a little bit of an outlier, but the rest of that team was so unbelievably deep, as you know. They outscored opponents 2-1 at 5-on-5 on the road to winning that Stanley Cup. They outscored opponents 66-33 at 5-on-5. That's how good that Vegas team was. Colorado, McKinnon, Makar, locks. Rantanen, probably a lock. 3 future Hall of Famers. Tampa Bay, Kucherov, Stamkos, Hedman, Vasilevsky. Absolute stone-cold lead pipe locks. Braden Point, have a decent chance. The Blues, extreme outlier. Just Pietrangelo, only guy. Ryan O'Reilly, I don't think so. The Capitals, Ovechkin, Backstrom. Maybe John Carlson, even though I'm a little bearish on him, I don't really think so. Pittsburgh, Malkin, Crosby, Letang, unfortunately, Marc-Andre Fleury. Chicago, Kane, Taves, Keith. Keith's already there. Kane and Taves will be there. The Kings, Kopitar, Doughty, Quick. The Bruins, Chara, Bergeron. That's 2. Even though it's only 2. And Marchand, small contributor on that team. That's 3. The Blackhawks again. The Red Wings, excuse me. Wow, I'm tired. Zetterberg, Datsuk, Lidstrom, Osgood. I think Osgood. I could be wrong on 2009. And Pittsburgh again, and on and on and on and on. Panarin, maybe? That's all I got for you with this Rangers team. And you know what the sad part of this is as we wrap up this conversation, and now I'm just going to pick up my microphone and lean back now because I'm starting to riff a little more than I was earlier. This team has been so poorly run for so much of its history. The sad part is 100 years of Rangers hockey, 4 Stanley Cups. They have won the Stanley Cup in 4 of the 100 seasons they've played. They have won a Stanley Cup in the non-original 6 era 1 time. America has entered a world conflict the same amount of times since the last one. They have entered a world conflict. They entered World War II December 8th, 1943. No, 1940, December 7th, 1941, excuse me. There's a lot of shit rattling around up here, if you didn't know. But they entered World War II after Pearl Harbor. The Rangers won the Cup in 40. It took them another 50 years to win one. And at this rate, it might take them more than another 50 because unlike some of the better run teams in this league, the Rangers don't care about winning. The Rangers will hem and haw about playing the right way, about no BS, about pride. You don't hear them say they want to win. You don't hear them talk about how losing makes them sick. You don't hear them talk about how they hate losing. This is a team that lacks identity, that lacks leadership. From the top down. That's not just the guys on the ice. And it's funny. I don't dislike JT Miller, the person. I dislike what JT Miller represents. JT Miller represents everything that is wrong with the contemporary USA hockey project. It's not that he scored 100 points in a season. It's that he plays the right way. It's that he's miserable. It's that he gets the best out of his teammates. Why don't we talk about the fact he had a 100-point season a couple years ago? That's the problem with the miracle, I don't need the best players, I need the right ones, anecdotal nonsense. 45 years ago, when you were bringing college kids, you could convince me of this. Does Canada sit around telling bedtime stories about how gritty and tough they are? No. They win the gold medal. They laugh at America for thinking we can win the gold medal. And they're probably going to do it again. Now, look, they have the benefit of their one goonish guy, Tom Wilson, being better right now than both Vincent Trocheck and JT Miller are playing. Tom Wilson has turned himself into a functional player in spite of all of the other baggage. I am so tired of this hockey team. I have never been less interested in a team than I am right now. The Rangers have iced some truly god-awful teams. Under David Quinn, that last year of Alain Vigneault, guys like Rob O'Gara and Ryan Sproul, just disgustingly bad hockey players. David Desharnais in his turtleneck, Peter Holland, Adam Cracknell, just abysmally bad hockey players who had no business being on an NHL. Guys like Cody McLeod, just atrocious hockey players who had no business being in the NHL. But the Rangers were promising us, we're going to win. It's going to be okay someday. It's going to get better. And instead, you sit here and you watch this crap and then you listen to the nonsense. Oh, we didn't play with enough pride. You're a professional athlete in the top 1% of all income earners in the United States. You are going to represent the United States at the Olympics because your general manager is going to pull a favor for you. Shut up and play better. I do not care. I am so beyond caring about anecdotal and what the players think and what the players say. I can tell you infinitely more about the Rangers' problems by looking at a couple box scores than you could ever get from watching the pre or post game show and listening to the players talk about what they think went wrong. And yeah, they've had their personalities and their ideas eroded out of them over time. And I'm aware what sports does to you as an athlete. It changes how you think about the game. This is a bad hockey team constructed very poorly by somebody who is looking to save his job. Chris Drury should be fired tomorrow. I don't care who brings you bring in as a replacement. That's the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap. I don't care if it's Brendan Shanahan. I don't care who you bring in as the replacement general manager. They're probably going to suck too. There aren't a lot of good GMs in this league. There are maybe 5 or 6 who I would dare say are actively good. Being that it's a challenge, you need to be willing to take that risk because ultimately, you know Chris Drury is not the guy. Chris Drury has had 5 years. He has fired David Quinn, Gerard Gallant, Peter Laviolette. He's hired Mike Sullivan in addition. I'm good. There is nothing Chris Drury's going to be able to do to convince me this is going to go well. We are stuck with Zibanejad and Miller and Trocheck for the foreseeable future. Fox and Shesterkin will prevent them from ever being serious lottery contenders. They are doomed to be the St. Louis Blues, the Minnesota Wild, the late Islanders under Lou Lamoriello. They are doomed to be the 9th, 8th, maybe the 7th best team. And the last stat I have for you before I wrap. In the last 15 years, there has been one single team, to win the Stanley Cup from either the 7th, 8th seed in the old format or one of the 2 wild cards in our present format. That was the LA Kings in 2012 when they beat the Devils. A wild card team has made the Cup final a couple times. Florida did it the first time when they lost to Vegas. Ultimately, they made the Cup final as a wild card team. That's doable. But we're talking about hedging the direction of the franchise on a once in 15 plus years occurrence. The Rangers are a good road team. Do not get me wrong. They have the best road record in the NHL. They're not good. This is a terrible hockey team. They are miserably boring to watch. They are poorly constructed. They don't do anything particularly well other than miss the net and give empty platitudes. I don't care. This is an unlikable team that's really a reflection of ownership. And it always starts at the top in sports. Whenever you reach an organization that seems to be as perpetually screwed as the Rangers are, it starts at the top. You look at the problems the New York Football Jets have had in their existence under the Johnson family. You look at the problems the Giants are having right now under the Maras. You look at the Browns, the Brown family owning the Cincinnati Bengals. You look at the Dolphins and their ownership problems over the last 15, 20 years under Stephen Ross. You look in the NHL, the Paculas and the Sabres. You look at the way some of these teams have been managed. Hell, I doom the Rangers to St. Louis Blues purgatory. At least the Blues got a Fugazi Stanley Cup out of it before they fell apart. This is an uninspiring hockey team playing bland, boring hockey, and your penance is you get to watch USA Hockey try and play like the way the Rangers are and hopefully beat Canada 2-1. Or we're going to hear about how it was so close. We just needed to check a little tighter. That Tom Wilson, he got us. We couldn't do anything to stop him. So next time, we're going to have to bring somebody a little bit tougher. Or maybe we should have brought Patrick Kane or Jonathan Quick because those guys have so much big game experience as opposed to just bringing the best players you can. Don't go to a gunfight and talk about the scope on your gun. Bring the best gun you got, the one you know how to use, and shoot back at the other guy. Don't tell me about the scope or the holographic sight or the laser or the ammunition. Whatever's going to work in the fight. I am so tired of this hockey team. I hate this general manager with every fiber of my being, and I cannot wait for the day he gets fired. Everyone enjoy the rest of their Festivus. Be sure to subscribe to Liberty Blue wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. I will talk to you guys next week with Andrew. Until then, everyone have a safe and fun holiday.